Hey everybody, so today I thought I would talk about an event that is going on in the booktube, book blogger, bookstagram, all that bookish internet usage, an event that is being celebrated now, very recently, and that is the 10th anniversary of the Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer. I don't care. Here's the thing. A large portion of the book community is very thrilled about these 10 years. And I am not so much. Actually, I am immensely disappointed that this franchise has been on this earth 10 years. I am not a fan of Twilight, and it's not on the level of before people say it, and people have been saying it for years, because I think Harry Potter is better. I mean, I do think Harry Potter is better, but it's not for that reason. It's not this clash of fandoms that everybody makes it out to be. Because, like I said, I'm part of so many fandoms. I don't believe in the headbutting of the fandoms, especially when they're not the same. I have had a problem with Twilight for a very long time. Not always, because obviously it became super popular, because obviously I'm 20, so it would have come out when I was 10, but it probably became popular when I was 11 or 12, so a couple years after its creation. And obviously, like every other 12-year-old girl, I wanted to read Twilight, because all my friends were reading it, everybody was saying how good it was, yada yada yada, peer pressure, hype, all that. My mother, back when I was that age, was very adamant about checking to see kind of what I was reading and viewing to make sure I wasn't getting the wrong ideals. And she looked up Twilight and she told me no. She said that I was going to get the wrong idea about relationships. And I mean, I took it to mean probably sex or stuff, but it wasn't. Obviously, the Twilight Saga is not sexually explicit. My mother was very concerned about Bella and Edward's dynamic, which are the concerns I share now after reading it. Sorry, Mom, if you're watching it. I did read it. In a sense, without looking deeper at it, Twilight is just a nice little, long, fluff series about vampire romance directed towards young women, rather than aggressive vampire fiction that's marketed towards my age now that's very explicit. This was a very soft and, I guess, gentle, almost, vampire fiction. But when you look at it more, it's immensely concerning, and that's my issue with Twilight, is it has given girls kind of the wrong idea about what relationships are. And the fact that this has been going on for 10 years offends me. That there's been 10 problematic years of giving girls the wrong idea. So I decided I'll discuss some of the problems I have with it, the few small things I will give it, and then obviously leave it open for discussion in the comments below. Obviously, if you like it, it doesn't make you a bad person. You enjoy it. Maybe you enjoy it on the level of it's a nice little, it's fluffy, you know, it's a simple read. It's very long, but it's very simple. Perhaps that's your thing. And there's no, it's not that it's a bad thing you like Twilight. It's problematic in itself, but it doesn't make you problematic for enjoying it. But one of the main issues I have with it is Bella's reaction in New Moon when Edward leaves. That is the 100% clear sign that this was not a healthy relationship. Basically, a majority of the book is spent and skipped over, since there's that large, like, what is it, I think a year, 6 months, or a few months gap that's like, just says, you know, like the SpongeBob thing, a few months later or whatever, and she has fallen into this disgusting depression where she cannot function, where she just lays there and it's just like, Edward left me. And that in itself shows that it is a very unhealthy relationship, because it shows Bella's horrible dependence and almost addiction to him. And she doesn't want to go out with her friends. She doesn't want to talk to her family. She decides to try to get with Jacob, to maybe try to forget or whatever. And the only time she is happy and whole again is when Edward's around. And that's just so problematic because it gives this weird impression to girls that that's how you're supposed to act when your boyfriend leaves, or like that that's healthy. It's not. It's healthy to be upset that your boyfriend leaves you. It is healthy to be very sad that, you know, especially if it's under a weird circumstance. But it is not acceptable, and it is not healthy, and the relationship is not healthy. If there was such a strong level of dependence, she cannot function without him, where she lays around or just forces herself. She is showing signs of depression over a guy leaving, and, you know, depression is so much more than that. And in itself, Bella is not a well-rounded character. She's very flat. That's also my problem, is these characters are very one-dimensional. They're not multifaceted. Background characters are just little props to be used to continue this blasé story that Stephenie Meyer tries very hard to make interesting, and the movie franchise tries to make interesting. I think one of the creepy things, the one very creepy thing, is Edward watching Bella while she sleeps in the first book without her knowledge or consent. Ladies, if a guy, this is obviously 10 years later, but if a guy is doing this, it is not romantic. You should call the cops. Like, it's not okay for this to be happening. And Bella takes it as this wonderful romantic gesture. It's horrifying. I would be horrified and terrified to find out if a guy was just watching me sleeping and being like, I find it fascinating. I'd be like, no, you need to leave now, and I'm calling the cops. It's just this image Stephenie Meyer gives off, and I think she's trying to mimic, because Wuthering Heights is obviously referenced a lot, that maybe this tragic, obsessive love story that Heathcliff and Kathy have, which in itself is also not healthy. If you have or haven't read Wuthering Heights, understand it's not healthy of a relationship either. This was not a good relationship model, ultimately, excuse me, to go off of. I don't know, but like I said, the characters themselves are very flat. Bella, for instance, she spends, the first book complaining, boo-hoo, I have to go live with my father. Boo-hoo, in this rainy town of Forks, Washington. Boo-hoo, I hate my life. Boo-hoo, but I don't like my mom much more either. Boo-hoo, oh no, I am so ugly. I am so boring. When there is a difference between low self-esteem and a well-written character of low self-esteem to just this instance of, no, I am so ugly. And it's not even intensely. It's just like, I'm pale and brunette and brown-eyed. Oh God, I am so ugly. There's nothing ugly about her. And clearly men, human and paranormal, want to be with her. She makes friends immediately with, you know, that normal human people. Guy wants to date her. You know, she seems like a very popular person, which in her demeanor and attitude I do not understand how, because she is quite the Debbie Downer. Like, she's really, really down all the time. She's so negative going in. So maybe, I guess, Edward leaving in New Moon was the ultimate trigger to her depression. But she clearly is not a happy person. But, and then there's the vampires. And they're all flat, too. And my one major question, because obviously Edward is a vampire from like the early 1900s, so he hasn't been around that long. He's trapped in a 17-year-old's body, but I'm sorry, why would you stay in high school for eternity? Like, I can't imagine subjecting yourself and moving around all the time to like just keep going to high school and having, obviously you're a genius and school's easy, but if you're so bored, why would, they could have given this creepy family dynamic of we're all homeschooled. But I don't understand why you would spend an eternity in high school. I just don't. I'm sorry, Stephenie Meyer. It doesn't make sense speaking from somebody who has left high school. I would not spend eternity in high school and would be very angry I was turned into a vampire at 17 years old. There's just something unfathomable, and then her trying to make them these beautiful, untouchable creatures. And it's just, it borders on the ridiculous. All the characterizations, Jacob and his clan of werewolves, whatever you want to call it, even they are, you know, very generic. Everybody's a weird-ass background character. The only major werewolf besides is, like, Jacob. Everybody else is, like, weird, creepy background characters. And let's be real, imprinting is also really creepy. Especially when the younger ones, because there was the one guy that was like shunned for imprinting on a 2-year-old, and then Jacob imprinting on the baby. It's creepy. And the fact that Stephanie Meyer went and wrote this plotline is offensive. This creepy ass, ultimately pedophilic plotline that got involved. I don't care that their daughter aged very quickly. It's weird. Like, really weird. There's just so many strange issues and problematic relationships, and even Bella's father, Charlie. Charlie's the most, like, sane out of everybody in that friggin' story. But even Charlie has this aggression level, and I don't know if it's because he's a cop, but still, where he's like, I'm going to shoot Edward. And she's like, Dad, no. No. That's also grossly ridiculous. The father ultimately treating his child like weird property. That's also problematic. There's just so many problems with it, with healthy relationships. It's been proven by, people of domestic abuse, and those that have followed through, or even domestic abuse hotlines. Bella and Edward's relationship 100% matches with that of an abusive one. He tells her what to do. She does. It's very problematic, and you can't actively ignore it. And then she fucks with the vampire lore. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of modern vampire romances, vampire stories, and changes to the lore. I don't think we have to stick to the traditional, although I can be a purist. Being an English major, I've read a lot of classic vampire lit, and also I really like classic vampire lit. So there's a level of understanding that I think we need to pay homage to the old ways of vampire lore, but I am not against new creations, except when they're stupid. I'm sorry. Here's the thing. The idea that maybe that vampires could function in the daylight in a very cloudy, rainy place like Forks, Washington is not a terrible idea. Like, I will give her that. This idea that perhaps vampires can function in low-level sunlight or very minimal, I get that. I can see that. Vampires live in Alaska part of the year, maybe. But that in itself, I don't think is a bad concept, to have vampires live in a rainy area. Maybe hence the popularity of vampires in London, might be. But that is understandable. Like, that part of the lore where it was like, hey, if it's actually cloudy, we can kind of functionally go outside. But the fact that she makes them sparkle, I don't understand. The point was, they're so beautiful and ethereal that they glisten. No mythical creature should do that. Unless you're like a sea serpent coming out of the water and there's water, sunlight on the water. All right. It wouldn't be sparkly. It would just be glistening. And that's the problem. There's a level of unnecessary silliness added to the lore. That, like, the glitter doesn't serve a purpose. It's not like it's a defense mechanism and blind people. It's this very odd addition to the appearance to, I guess, hypothetically make them more beautiful in the daylight. I don't think it's a functional addition to the lore by any means. And obviously, vegetarian vampires is not a new concept. Vampire Diaries, the series of books, was written before Twilight in the 90s. E.L. James did the same thing with Stefan not drinking from humans, and Damon, frowning upon it because he did. This is not a new concept of this abstaining, and then Anne Rice's interview with the vampire, where Louis would abstain and drink from rats. This is not a new concept of vegetarian vampires, and people sometimes, when their critiques of Twilight, say this is stupid, which it's odd, but it's by no means a new trend. Anne Rice's books are very popular, and that was a trend. It's kind of like, I can't fault her for that, because she's just going very much under the new lore of this idea of keeping humanity as a vampire, so not to feast on people. The reluctant vampire is not a new concept, but I don't think her version was well executed in general, minus the problematic plotline of the relationships and the neediness and the weird kind of domestic abuse and creepy pedophile plots that go off it has so many flaws. Obviously not as many as its modern ripoff and counterpart, minus the sparkly vampires, 50 Shades of Grey, but that is another video of problems. But that's also part of it. There was a small level of problems that was very minor in the big scheme of things, but then her franchise had other franchise built off of it and caused more problems. And obviously this got highly monetized by the movie series, which is also not excellent. I haven't watched the movies. I literally can only get through 5 minutes of the first movie, and I turn it off. Because it's terrible. It's terrible lighting, it's terrible script, it's terrible cinematography, it's terrible everything. I mean, I am 100% okay in understanding of why Robert Pattinson knew this was going to make him a crap ton of money, and he hated his job, but he was like, I'm going to do this to make money. I totally get that, because he's not an idiot. But it was just this poorly made, very monetized off the hype version of this kind of sad franchise already of books. And this is not necessarily, it's continuation. Hunger Games is also the same way. The book series, the movies are a bit lacking sometimes. But it's just, there's so much inadequacy that we as readers accepted from this franchise, that editors accepted from this franchise, that just consumers accepted, actors and actresses and people accepted this silliness as something to strive for. And I mean, good on Stephanie Meyer. She made a crap ton of money off of some abusive relationship drivel, thinly veiled in sparkles. I mean, good on her. I can't fault her for monetizing off of this idea she had in a dream. But there needs to be an acknowledgement of these problems and the fact that this franchise has been popular for 10 years. Still is popular. And it's a franchise that still is popular after 10 years. But we as consumers should not accept inadequacy as something to strive for in this industry of fiction and literature, especially when you, as an author, you have a responsibility when you are especially writing towards younger readers, not children, but impressionable teenagers. You have a responsibility to portray relationships, whether it be dating, family, friends, as something that is healthy, or if it isn't healthy, a level of acknowledgement on the parties involved, not outside ones, because Bella's father acknowledged it. Charlie was very like, this is very unhealthy and I don't want you in it. And Bella was like, no, it's fine. Edward was like, no, it's fine. And they were so complacent in this unhealthiness, but maybe because they were in it? I don't know. It just doesn't seem okay that an adult woman wrote this and didn't notice this is a problem at all. It boggles my mind, which is why I'm not okay with this 10 years of accepting inadequacy and poor content. It's by no means saying other things are better. It's just a level of, we need to accept that this franchise that people are celebrating being on this earth for 10 years needs improvement, and so many people refuse to acknowledge it needs improvement. It's okay if you like something to go, I like this, but there's a couple things wrong with it. It in fact makes you a more well-rounded, decent human if you can acknowledge, I like this, but it has its problematic elements that could be fixed. And yes, it's fiction. The argument is often used, it's just fiction, it's not real life. But there are so many people that don't experience the world outside of fiction, whether it be movies or film, TV, books. So we have a duty and responsibility as consumers and writers and creators to put out this content that portrays the world properly, I suppose, and acknowledge when unhealthy relationships are unhealthy. Which is, once again, another issue why I have with 50 Shades, which is for another video. Hopefully, maybe I'll have one. But I just think we as consumers, as I've said many times already in this video, need to talk about it. And it's been 10 years, and we still really don't talk about it, and those that do try to get shushed by the people that like it. It is okay to have an open conversation about problems in your favorite franchises. I mean, hell, I'm bringing Harry Potter in. The Harry Potter franchise, very much in our aging. That's why it's important. In our aging, have acknowledged problematic things that happen. Characters that are problematic that we used to worship as children. We acknowledge that they have very real flaws. And I think celebrating 10 years of Twilight, now that we are, you know, almost a decade older, those of us that read it, we need to acknowledge that what we read at 10 and thought was great literature now has problems, and we need to discuss those problems, and it doesn't make it a lesser franchise to discuss its issues. So I'm not celebrating Twilight's 10 years. If you are, that is perfectly fine. But let me know down below. Are you happy about 10 years? Are you indifferent? Could you literally not care? Do you feel the same way as me? You know, I want to have a conversation about this, especially looking back 10 years from now, looking back on what you read, or especially if you're rereading it because it's 10 years. What are you seeing that bothers you, or you're noticing now years down the road? You know? So, if you enjoyed this video and would like more like it, thumbs up, comment, let's have a discussion, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will talk to you guys again later. Goodbye.